And, Danny, I appreciate you hopping on with us today. How you doing?
Doing okay, buddy. I've been fighting the virus the last few days, but I'm going to give this thing a shot here. I appreciate you having me.
Good. Okay. Well, if you need to get off, you can.
I
but
appreciate it. Thank you.
Let's get into it here. So I see Everett Roussaw is going to be an Arkansas Razorback for the 2023 class. You know, and I know for years we've wondered, you know, linebacking recruiting can be an issue at Arkansas, and it has been.
Yeah.
But this is a pretty good get, and this is one of those Georgia gets of which we're starting to see more of them come in.
I like the Georgia kids. Do y'all? I mean, these kids, it's a different world down there. This kid's 6'2", 215. It goes all the way back to last June when about 30 kids from Cedar Grove High School, just an enormous high school program, powerhouse, national powerhouse, I would call it. They showed up in Fayetteville for a camp last June, I want to say the 14th. And, of course, everybody knows the connection with Jimmy Smith, having been the long time. He's kind of a local legend down there. You know, he took them to state championships as a track program, as a head football coach. And, of course, those connections remain strong today. So he was able to get a busload of these guys all the way to Fayetteville for a camp. Everett Roussaw was among those that camped up here, and he looked like $1 million. It didn't take them long to extend the offer, and they were off and running. And ever since that point, Phil, I felt like, yeah, they're probably going to be in really good shape for this one. He thinks the world of Jimmy Smith, and he thought the world of his first impression of Arkansas. So he came back in November. That's always a good sign. If you can get them on a plane, let alone a car, but a plane to pay their own way to come up here during the middle of their season and yours, I think it's always pretty telling. And, of course, he did that for the Mississippi State game, which was, at the time, really interesting because the Bulldogs are over there recruiting him just as hard. And he was able to come up here and watch Arkansas win that thrilling, I want to say a 3-point win, comeback victory there in Fayetteville. So that was key. And then, of course, he told me in late December that he was coming up on January 22nd. And as soon as he told me that, I said, yeah, this thing's about to get wrapped up. So, and of course they did. They impressed him again this past weekend. He wanted to get it over with. So a really good pickup, 6'2", 215, really good size there. He may be a little bit heavier than that at this point, in my opinion. But as you said, he had some really good offers: Louisville, Mississippi State, Missouri, Central Florida, Virginia Tech is always a notable offer in my book. So a really good get, and I want to say their third defensive commitment for the class. They're up to number 3 in the nation. I never thought I'd say that. Number 3 in the country.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't care if it's January or not. It took me a long time to be able to say that, boys. So good for Arkansas.
I love it when Coach Pittman says the Hog is strong. When you see that, the Hog is freaking strong. Yes, sir.
That's roid strong.
Another thing I
Yes,
see
sir.
on your big red board here for defense, I mean, we might have to get used to kids from Georgia coming to play on the defensive side of the ball for Arkansas, because you got 4 or 5 of them over there, and you know, Jimmy Smith, Sam Pittman. Is this a new pipeline for Arkansas?
I think so. You know, there's so many down there, Phil, and they can't all sign with Georgia and Alabama and Auburn or Florida and Florida State, for that matter. I mean, there's so many of them that every year you see kids from Atlanta, and they sign with programs like Oklahoma State and Nebraska and Minnesota, and you sit there and go, man, Arkansas ought to be able to get a few of those. And for the longest time, I felt that way. And, of course, you bring in Coach Pitt and Scott Fountain, Jimmy Smith, so many guys with ties to that area, having coached in that area. And finally, it seems to be turning a corner for them. But I'm all for that. I think Arkansas has always gotten really good kids out of Georgia. You can go back decades, and they really have done a good job in that state when they've gotten them. So now, I mean, you look up and you begin to wonder, you know, about a Troy Ford, a 4-star linebacker out of Savannah, Raul Aguirre from Fayetteville, Georgia, Whitewater High School. Some of these kids that have already been here and probably going to be back a few more times before they decide. I think it's exciting for Arkansas to start to establish some kind of consistency. It's one thing to go down there every 2 to 3 years and pick out a decent player, but I think there's an opportunity to get 3, 4, 5 kids per class out of the state of Georgia, and typically you've had a pretty successful hit rate on those guys. So a good thing. And Alabama too. Now they're really starting to show up in Alabama quite a bit more. I haven't seen quite the amount of visitors making that trip from Alabama just yet, but I do think they're trying to work toward that.
Mm-hmm. One thing that's going to help that recruiting rate can continue to climb, and especially on the defensive side, is when Sam Pittman hires a new defensive line coach. Have you heard a time frame or any possible names thrown out there? Or what's the latest on that front as far as recruiting goes?
Yeah, the only thing I could touch on there is a time frame. I was told earlier this week that something would probably happen by the end of this week, and here we are getting close to it. So as far as names, I would push people to Trey Biddy. I've kind of let him just take off with that. I don't have time to really keep up with all the coaching names, but I'm sure he's got a big red coaching search board there on HawgSports, as he always does. So to answer your question, I think they've got a great opportunity to improve. I actually wrote about it earlier in the week. Arkansas you look at the 2021 roster. So this past season, Arkansas had the fewest amount of 4- and 5-star defensive linemen of anybody in the SEC.
Mm-hmm.
It was Arkansas and Vanderbilt. And you look up to last year's recruiting class under Jamal Ashley, and not going to kick him on the way out. I'm sure he did his best, but Arkansas didn't even have a 4-star defensive line visit campus in the 2022 class. That's a problem. Now, we're not talking about signing a 4-star. We're talking about just getting an official visit from one, and they didn't even get a single guy on campus as a 4 or 5-star. And, I know it's really difficult. It's probably the most difficult position to recruit to Arkansas, to be honest with you. There's just not very many of them out there to begin with, and most of them want to stay close to home, and they're really tough to get. And Arkansas as a state does not produce very many of them. So I'll give you that. It's really, really difficult, but it's not impossible. Mm-hmm. It's not impossible. I refuse to believe that it's impossible to get them, and they've got a long way to go in that department, in my opinion.
Well, it's definitely not impossible because we see it at other positions of
That's
being
right.
able to get these 4 or 5-star guys on campus and show them what Sam Pittman's program's really about. And a lot of offers have been distributed the last few days. I've been seeing at least like 6 or 7 different guys on Twitter, and you've retweeted a lot of them. And I've always wondered, Danny, as far as like an estimate goes, how many actual offers does a program give out like per recruiting class? Because it feels like it's almost in the hundreds.
Yeah, it varies. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if Arkansas crosses 300 for this class. I want to say there's upwards of 250 already for the 23 class. But, I mean, you go look at a school like A&M and LSU, they don't have to offer that many. I've seen years where A&M never even offered 100. And, of course, they just ended up with the number 1 recruiting class for this cycle. And so, it varies from school to school. A lot of schools can afford to be very selective, and, it's just kind of pick and choose who do we want. Alabama, of course, is among those schools, and Arkansas is not. So Arkansas, of course, has to recruit more nationally, regionally, and there's nothing wrong with that as long as you get the right guys. But you asked me specifically, it's typically above 250 for Arkansas is what I've seen.
I know late signing day is coming up in a little bit. Has there been any movement or news about Miles Rouser?
Nah.
He's the one commit who didn't sign early.
Yeah, everything I've been told so far is don't get your hopes up for him signing. So if he were to sign, it would be a very pleasant surprise is the way I would choose to put it at this time. Okay. It's a very fluid situation. Anytime something off the field comes up with one of these kids, I try to be really careful, and people don't like that. I understand it, but you got to get my understanding too. I don't want to put out anything that I'm not 100% sure on, especially with an underage student athlete. I'm just, not going to dive off into it too much.
Well, it's called choosing your words carefully, and in your profession, Danny, you got to do
smart.
that, man. You really do. So appreciate that, and appreciate you joining us. Hope you feel better and kick that virus out of your system.
We're working on it, boy. I appreciate it.
BetOnline would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march to the playoffs and beyond. BetOnline remains the #1 spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2022. New year and a new updated desktop and mobile wagering to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code BELIEVE to get started. That's BLEAV. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts.